Hello, bonjour, namaste, ni hao, and ohio everybody. What is going on? It is Gale right here, and welcome back to the YouTube channel once again for another Danmachi video. And as some of you guys may know, a couple of days ago, Fujino Omori did an interview with Real Sound for the 10th anniversary of Danmachi, and of course, we reacted to it. We read through the entire interview. I gave you guys my thoughts on what I thought about the interview and some of the answers that Fujino Omori gave and some of the big reveals that he did in regards to some of the previous light novels, some of the present story arcs going on, and the future of the Danmachi series. And overall, I thought that the interview was super well done. I really liked it. And today, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be reading your guys' comments in the Reddit post, of course, where the synopsis was made of the interview. And along with that, I'm going to be going over to my comments section, and I'm going to pick out some of the comments that basically came up in my YouTube video, and we're going to be reacting to those comments as well. So, of course, if you guys go on to enjoy this video, please be sure to leave a like down below, subscribe to the channel for more Danmachi, and of course other Danmachi content as well. And let me know in the comment section down below if you guys have any further thoughts on the interview in itself, if you guys have had the opportunity to read it right now, and maybe if you guys have some opinions on some of the comments made by these guys. Make sure to leave your comments in the comment section down below, and of course make sure to keep it civil. Don't insult any of these guys for their opinions. Of course, remember, this is the internet. It is free reign over your opinion, so make sure you guys don't insult somebody because their opinion is different to yours, of course, right? So keep that in mind. Now, of course, remember that we will also be making a video on Saturday for the Vesta party, where I still believe there is going to be some form of a reveal on that day, of course, the 4th of November. I wish I could be live for it, and I wish I could actually watch it live, but unfortunately, one, it costs money to actually watch it. It's like 3,500 yen, which is about 20 or so pounds or dollars effectively. And second of all, I work that day, so unfortunately I can't watch it live, but we will be making a recap video on that day for the Vesta party. Now, one more thing before we click on the click to see spoiler button, I would like to warn people that this video will probably contain spoilers for volume 18, because one of the answers from Omori sensei was in regards to volume 18. So I would highly urge you guys, if you guys haven't watched or read anything regarding volume 18, stay away from this video. You can come back in the future video and, you know, potentially watch this all over again and see the opinions on volume 18 from the viewers in regards to Omori's answer regarding that question. But of course, like I said, spoiler warning, have to put that disclaimer out there so that people don't get, you know, bamboozled by the fact that there's volume 18 information in here, of course, right? So in 3, 2, 1, I'm gonna click the spoiler review now. Alright, so to quickly run through the synopsis and to give you guys a rundown of exactly what went down in the interview and the answers he gave, the main points were that volume 18 had been rewritten 4 times before it was published. Aiza's past will be revealed in the main story, while Esso will now be focused on Lufia, and that there is only one more arc left in Sword Oratoria that he wants to write, and after that he's probably going to end it, or he might continue it with individual stories potentially. The third point was that the MS ending had been decided a long time ago, and it's still on track to be that same ending. However, right now, the story is in a slight detour, I assume primarily because they want to try and build up to the finale and to the final arc, so that they need to go through some of the lore, some of the world building again, basically, and expand on it way more. So that's why they're doing that slight detour, basically. And then finally, the fourth point is that Volume 7, Haruhime's arc, of course, the Ishtar Familia arc, was intended to be darker and more serious because of the setting, a brothel, but the editor said it was no good. So we kind of knew about the fourth point, in all honesty, already. That's nothing new, really. The first 3 points, I think, are very key points. Now, I've already given my opinion on it, all, you know, in a previous video, of course, right? And obviously, this guy gave his own personal thoughts, and I obviously spoke about it. So you guys can go and watch that video. I will be leaving a link to it at the end of this video, so you guys can go and watch it yourselves there. But I want to see what you guys have to say. So we're going to start reading the comments, and I'm going to see what they have to say. So this is sorted by the best comments, so highest upvoted comments. So we're going to see what the community approves of and disapproves of. So let's see. I agree with most of your points, specifically about the one ending SO on volume 12. that was a perfect climax to that story, which would be difficult to top. So let's go over this guy's personal thoughts, since the first point literally is in line with that. After 4 rewrites, I would expect volume 18 to be better than it was. It's hard to think that the only way to finish it was with a massive amount of plot armor. In regards to volume 18 being better than it was after 4 rewrites, I said this in the previous video, more rewrites does not equal a better story usually. In fact, I would say the more you rewrite, the worse it gets, arguably, because you're going to keep changing things, and the more you change things, the more things muddle up, you know? So it doesn't really work in the way you think it does, the fact of, you know, how rewrites work, in all honesty. The second point is, I think SO should have ended with volume 12. It was the perfect ending. If then he wanted to focus on Lafia, he could have had a couple of Familiar Chronicle volumes. This one I kind of agree with. I don't necessarily agree with the fact that, you know, SO should have ended with volume 12. I think in the sense of like the arcs should have ended is what I mean to say. So I'm okay with them doing like singular light novels with focused stories, like, you know, SO volume 13 with Lafia, SO volume 14 with Reveria, Gareth, and, you know, Finn, of course, their past and their current present time as well, them, you know, growing to the characters that they are. I think that's fine. I just think that if there doesn't need to be a continuation of the arcs, let us see the Loki familiar story now beyond their key arc, which was of course taking down Evilus and everything. That's my personal opinion on it, is that volume 12 should have been the end of all of that, in all honesty. Of course, I like the fact that he does plan to have one more arc. I'm curious to see what exactly that arc is going to be. Hopefully it's more dungeoneering, but I think, yeah, I agree with it for the most part, that volume 12 should have been the final arc, and then maybe they could have done more singular stories. I agree that Familiar Chronicles could have been a way to go with Lafia or somebody else, but Sword Art Oratoria is meant to be around the Loki Familia as a whole. And so far, you know, we've had Lafia, we've had the, you know, Reveria, Gareth, and Finn being the focal points of 14. I think, you know, it's okay if Lafia is the main, like, perspective in the future light novels, as long as the Loki Familia is still getting their shine in Sword Art Oratoria, because the idea of Sword Art Oratoria is about the entirety of the Loki Familia. It has been arguably since, I would say, volume 5 more so than anything else of Sword Art Oratoria, because Tiona were, you know, a focal point at one point, then Bet was in volume 7 and 8 arguably, and then, you know, it's consistently shifting around perspectives, I would say. And then Finn was also, I would say, arguably a big focal point from SO10 to 12 alongside, you know, Lafia and Eyes as well. So I think, you know, that's something to bear in mind as well, that Sword Art Oratoria is the Loki Familia. And while, yeah, he did say that, you know, Lafia was going to be the main character from now on, doesn't necessarily mean that the Loki Familia is going to get pushed to the side for that, you know, for the upcoming arcs and stuff. That's my personal thought process. I'm kind of curious about Volume 7's original plan, but I guess we'll never know that. I mean, yeah, we kind of know what they mean by intend to be darker and more serious. I assume the Red Light District would have been more of a Red Light District properly. The brothel would have been a proper brothel. Haruhime would have not, you know, had that turn, you know, that twist at the end where she's basically never have, you know, never, her virginity has not been taken and everything, you know, she's still pure and innocent, she's a maiden. That twist would have never happened probably. I think that's basically the direction they would have gone in. And the slight detour worries me. I hope it's not going to be more volumes like 19. I disagree with this. I think more volumes like 19 is perfectly fine, but we'll see what everybody has to say. I'm happy to read that Ice's story will be written in the main story, but baffled about Lafia being the main in SO. She's not that popular, is she? Eyes being in the main story is a thumbs up from me as well. I think that's absolutely a great thing for sure. A lot of people have been asking for the Eyes arc for so long, and the fact that, you know, Omori has confirmed that we're getting it is fantastic, of course, right? It's absolutely fantastic. Lafia is a lot more popular than you think she is. That's one thing I will say. I think a vocal majority a vocal minority, I should say, sorry, not a vocal majority, a vocal minority don't really like her that much, and if you look online, that's the case. But I feel like in Japan and especially in some other countries as well, Lafia is very much adored as well. So I think that's something to bear in mind. I also have grown to like her a lot as a character. I still don't love her necessarily. I think she still has a lot of flaws, but I think that's something that will improve over time. And I still don't mind some of the characteristics that she demonstrates as well, right? I know a lot of people get frustrated with the whole Belle thing and everything with, you know, their relationship and all. I don't mind it as much. I feel like people are taking it out of proportion a bit too much, I feel sometimes. But I also understand their perspective on it, in that, you know, it's been 12 novels, it's been 10 years since you know, Lafia has shown her face, and you know, we've seen her opinion on Belle for a long time. But we have to also accept the fact that she has grown since then. A lot of the times, this is something I've mentioned in a previous video actually as well. I think I mentioned it in the SO13 spoiler review or something along those lines. I don't remember exactly when. But our first impressions of a character matter so much. And in that, if the first impression is super bad, that super bad impression will stay with us for a long period of time, if not the entire story's duration, right? And it's the same thing with Lafia. While we may grow to appreciate her a little bit, that first impression is always going to stick with us. And we're always going to have that sort of like negative perspective about Lafia, which I know it's kind of annoying and frustrating, but that's just how it is. That's just how we are as human beings. We tend to have preconceptions about certain things, and I think that's just how it ends up being, to be quite honest. It's just how it ends up being. And I think that's the same thing with Lafia. I know I have this with certain characters, like, for example, Sasuke in Naruto. I'm not the biggest fan of him, even though he's a lot better as a character now, of course, right? Come Boruto and everything. Sasuke, to me, I still don't really love him as a character. But yeah, sometimes, you know, when the character is really good from the beginning, but doesn't see much growth, you still like the character. That's another thing as well. That's the opposite side, where if your first impression's really good of a character, but you don't see much growth from them, you're still like, that character is really nice, you know? So I think there's that as well going about when it comes to Lafia, for example, as well, where that negative impression that we've had of her has stayed with us for a very long time, I feel. Even though I feel like she's a lot better than what she was in Volume 1 or Volume 2 of Sword Art Online, in all honesty. So yeah, I'm not a Lafia lover, but for sure she's one of the author's favorites. Yeah, I mean, yeah, Omori loves her. Omori loves all the elves, to be honest. I mean, that's something that's dead certain, for sure. For sure, honestly. I'll just keep reading SO just like as I like the series as a whole so far. But yeah, everything happening after Volume 12 is gonna feel disconnected. I disagree. Volume 13 was super connected. I would say Volume 13 has probably been one of the more connected light novels to the main series, arguably. It's very similar in line with Volume 10 of Sword Art Online in that, you know, it moves parallelly alongside what is happening in the main series light novels, right? It's actually happening at the same time. And it culminates with them, you know, kind of cross-sectioning a bit once again. So I disagree with that in that it's disconnected. It's still connected. But yeah, and Volume 14, of course, the events that happen in Volume 14, I feel will have a massive, what's it called? A massive effect on what ends up happening in the main story as well, in my personal opinion. It's one of the events is what I'm referring to in regarding to the three characters that I mentioned, Gareth, Finn, and Riveria. So yeah. He likes his elves more and more as the story goes on, but he has a special place in his heart for her. That said, she must have an audience, since I don't think the editors would continue free-lighting her stories if she didn't have a fandom. She might be a lot more popular in Japan. Tsunderes in general are pretty popular. I agree with that. They go on to talk about hurting her more. She may require a worse hurt than Lepilvis for that growth. This is not gonna happen, unfortunately. I mean, there's no way to go beyond there, to be quite honest. So we're gonna skip that, but they're talking about how, you know, Lafia can be much better. I don't think you don't need to hurt characters to make them better. This is something I've said this for a very, very long time. I remember some people saying like Belle needs to go through pain and torture to be a better character, and I'm like, no, you don't need to do that. There's no reason for any character to go through pain in order to become a better character. Is it easy? Yes, it's an easy way to develop a character, but I don't think that's the best way to do it, because it's just unnecessary, in all honesty. In more situations than not, it's unnecessary. So yeah, that's my personal opinion. I really wish editors would stop meddling when a story is supposed to be darker and serious. Fix plot holes, cut unnecessary scenes, don't change the tone just because it's mature. Yeah, I kind of agree. I don't understand what's the problem with having a serious brothel as a setting, but in volumes 13 and 14 there is blood and gore everywhere. So let's address this first point before we move on to the second point. I agree and disagree with this, because first and foremost, I agree that there's no problem in having a serious brothel as a setting, but you have to remember that when Volume 6 came out, when was Volume 6 released? Volume 7, sorry. Volume 7 was super early in the novel's life cycle, right? What was it, 2017, 2016? 2016. It was even earlier than I thought. The anime had aired its first season just then. you are bringing in a brand new audience. And I think that's one of the things that they would want to address is, like, of course, having a serious setting would help attract a more mature audience and a more a greater audience. I would say a more it's not necessarily smarter audience. That's the wrong word to use, because that's not the case. You have a lot of younger audiences that are super smart as well, but you would definitely attract a more mature audience, but you'd also detract your younger audience as well. And I feel like that is something that they wanted to address, kind of. But obviously, if you're already having a brothel setting, then that younger audience is kind of a moot point. It's a weird thing, because you have to strike a balance between the two. And if you already have a brothel setting, then it's kind of hard to include that in any way, shape, or form, in all honesty. It's a weird one. It's a weird one. I get what they're coming from, right? But I wanted to address volumes 13 and 14 are way deeper into the series. You're able to go to that level because you're deeper in the series. You've got that audience nailed on. And whereas in the earlier phases of the light novel, you are still trying to find your feet. You're still trying to get that audience generated, and anything that could potentially push them away is probably cut by the editors. And I think that's what the editors that's where the editors come into play. Do I agree with it? Not really, no. I think editors, like he says, you know, the Kenneth Villa says, I think they're meant to be there to fix plot holes, cut unnecessary scenes, and so on and so forth. They're not meant to change overarching tones and stuff like that. But I understand where the editors come from, because at the end of the day, the job of the editors is to see how the best way that they can promote a series to a general audience. And I think that's the main thing. And again, one of the things that we should also add as well is that they mentioned that the readers liked volume 7 as well, the Japanese readers, it seems like. So clearly there is that discrepancy, and maybe they, like I said in that previous video, right, there must have been a focus group, because the way Omori stated that answer in the interview was that volume 7 was originally going to be darker. We changed it from being a darker to a more lighter tone. And when we gave it to our readers, they liked the lighter tone, which means that, one, they were only given the lighter tone, so they liked it from the get-go. So they never got a chance to experience the darker tone. Or they, the publishers, editors, and Omori Sensei himself, must have given the copies of both iterations of the script, or, you know, both iterations of the draft, to a focus group. A focus group is a group of individuals who are there to read and or test products or something like that, and it's a very small group of people. They must have been given both drafts, and one must have been like, yeah, we don't like the darker tone, but we like the lighter tone. Not one, but that focus group would have been like, we don't like the darker tone, we like the lighter tone, and a majority of them would have said the same thing. So that's where they might have also potentially been like, okay, maybe if the focus group says the lighter tone is better, we'll stick with the lighter tone. So I think that's where it also comes into play. But I have to also say that the editors sometimes save the story in past, fixing Omori's inconsistencies. Absolutely, I agree with this as well. I agree with it. And yeah, they changed the title. That's one thing I don't like the editors for, is changing the title from Familiar Myth to Is It Wrong to Try to Pick Up Girls in a Dungeon? Which, in my opinion, I don't think... I mean, I get it. It's, you know, more enticing for a younger audience, especially, right? For sure, right? Or a more teenage, young adult audience, for sure. I think Familiar Myth would have been way better, way cooler, and way more attractive as a title compared to Is It Wrong to Try to Pick Up Girls in a Dungeon? It is what it is. But yeah, I agree with I agree with Bakok Bebek here. Some fans are really obsessed with female characters' purity, especially when that said character is among the MC harem, though now might be different. I agree. I think that's also where it came into play, where Haruhime's purity would have wanted to be kept, because people would have been mad about, you know, Haruhime being, you know, impure, you know, what's the word, dirty in a way, which I disagree with. I mean, yes, kinda, but not really. I disagree with it. I think that she would have been a great character either way, and she might have had more to her, even, I would say, and it might have made Belle's whole thing even more, even though I still believe, you know, Belle rescuing Haruhime under that notion still is still amazing in itself. Yes, he found out about it afterwards, that she would just faint every time, but that didn't change the fact that he went through all that effort because he thought that Haruhime was suffering. So I think it's still fine. I think it's still fine. I think the editors have screwed up Danmachi. They've helped here and there for sure, outside of their obvious tasks. But I think they've made Omori change the direction he wants too many times. I disagree with this, because Omori's direction sometimes has also been pretty rough. I'm not gonna lie. I feel like Omori's direction has been rough at times as well. But I feel like the editors have done their best to try and keep it on track. And I think, you know, it's a very difficult task. You know, it's always going to be a super difficult task. I mean, we talked about volume 18 anyways, right? For example, and to go into more detail about volume 18, I think, you know, 4 times rewritten, it definitely seems like everybody had a different thought about the direction the story should have gone in, right? And it's a very difficult thing, because once you reach a certain point, especially in the story, when you're at a very critical point, and I mean, volume 18 was a critical point, because for a lot of people it was make or break, I would argue, right? And it ended up being make or break for a lot of people, because it broke a lot of people from Danmachi, and for some people it was absolutely fine and it made it for them. But at the end of the day, you know, in order to make that happen, the editors have to be on top of their game in order to make sure that the story is going in the right direction as much as possible, without it being way too overboard, in all honesty. So it's a very hard balance. It's a very hard balance. I don't really envy the editors, nor do I envy Omori sensei for some of the decisions that they have to make when it comes to the story, in all honesty. It's why I personally don't really like you know, writing fan fictions or anything, because I know I'm not capable of, you know, keeping the story in one direction and, you know, being able to address all the plot holes and everything of that sort, to be honest. But yeah, he said that the detour is happening at the moment, so that means he's referring to the education hour. Given that it is more like filler in nature, this confirms my suspicion that volumes 19 and 20 weren't originally part of the story, just like how 12 wasn't. I also suspected they weren't, because he said that the story of Danmachi was about 70% done as of the end of volume 16, and if 19 and 20 were a part of that percentage, then the series would be ending at about volume 24, which I just can't see happening. I'm thinking it'll be more like 26, 28 volumes. I agree with this. I mean, anyways, at volume 14, he said we were at 50%. I don't know how he managed to get to 70% with two more volumes, which was super weird in my opinion, because I remember he said 50% at volume 14. I don't remember exactly where it was, but I know for a fact, because I remember discussing this with a lot of the other Danmimo guys in my familia and outside of my familia as well, in regards to that 50%. And we estimated that it would be volume 28 that would happen. Now, of course, with volume 19 and 20 happening as well, of course, I assume we'll get another 2-3 arcs at least. It will end at probably volume 28. I agree. In regards to Esoa, he said that he had one more story in mind, but he isn't sure what he wants to do after that, so it doesn't necessarily mean that he'll end after that. I agree. Here's the original text for those curious from ChatGPT. So this is ChatGPT translating it. So let's see. Sword of Rotori series, which depicts the story of Ice Wallenstein, the sword princess whom Belle admires, is also related to the main story. I imagine it must be challenging to write. It is, however, I believe I should reveal Ice's past in the main story, otherwise it would be unfair to those who read the main story and not the side story, I assume, in this situation. On the other hand, I also genuinely want to provide something different for those who read the spin-off. For those reasons, Sword of Rotori is now shifting to focus on Lafia's story. She's an elf mage from Loki Familia as Belle, and is the same as Belle, who admires Ice. Yes, that's right. Additionally, Sword of Rotori started when I hadn't completely decided everything, unlike the main story. I had a vague idea about the mastermind Ennio, but the story was concluded in the 12th volume. There's one more story I want to write, but I'm fine up to that point, and I'm considering what happens after that. I feel like I'm writing it by groping in the dark. In contrast, it seems like you have a clear ending in mind for the main story. And so, yeah, he goes on to talk about how it has a predetermined ending. There are some detours. And he's starting to write with a bit more of a live feeling. And I think that's where he's gotten a little bit of inspiration from his stories that he's written in Danmimo, where it's a lot of it is off the cuff more often than not. So I think, to be fair, I feel like his Danmimo writing has helped him a lot lately, I would say, when it comes to live writing and, you know, bringing in things out of nowhere, I would say. So I credit where it's due. Now, Lafia has officially stolen Ice's role as Eso's protagonist. Well, Volume 12 was a pretty good ending for Ice's arc in Eso. In fact, it would have been a good way to end it if it was only about her. So I'm not surprised the focus is going to be more on Lafia after that. I agree. I think Ice is now more main story. Has to be more main story. No doubt about it, for sure. Yeah, Volume 7 was going to be darker in the sense of more adult tones and situations without being too explicit. I agree. Okay, let's see what Stinky Pete has to write here, because I've seen this guy so many times in the subreddit. It's very funny to see what he has to say. LN18 does read like a mashed together rewritten novel. Might have needed a 5th rewrite. No, that would have been worse. Again, I say this again. More rewrites does not equal a good light novel. 100% wrong about my ideas are SO, the MS, and I's. Does appear the LF-HF alliance will be MS post LN20. Not sure why Omori wants to focus SO on Fia. Ending SO after 12 made more sense, I assume he means. I like her story, but her story ended into SO 12. There are so many more other characters he could have focused on besides her and Loki Familia. I can see that point as well in that last point. The good points, I would say, overall, apart from the first point. I can see that potentially. I do see that potentially being a good point in that, you know, he could have probably focused on somebody else. I'm trying to think who else he could have focused on. Maybe more bringing in more of the juniors up, potentially up and running. When I say juniors, not necessarily juniors, but focusing more on like Raul, Ana Kitty, and so on and so forth potentially instead, right? Definitely not juniors, but like, yeah, you know what I mean, right? Getting them up and running more so, right? But I still think Lafia has a lot of room to grow, and especially if she is going to play a role in some way, shape, or form in the main story at the end of it all, which I assume she'll play some form of a role. Not a major role, but a role. I think it's important for us to see her growth through the side story, and you know, if she makes her appearance in the main story in the finale, you know, I mean, it'll be fantastic, because we as the reader of Sword Art Oratoria will feel jubilated that we're seeing the development of a character and her playing a solid role in the finale. That being said, though, it can also be the counter side. It can be the opposite as well, where we see her growth but we don't see her in the final fight at all, which will make it a lot more annoying that, you know, we haven't seen her grow to a... We've seen her grow, but we've not seen her, you know, culminate in some form of a final fight, right? And on top of that, on the other side as well, if you don't read SO, it's like, where did Lafia come out of? You know, where did she come from? So yeah, it is what it is. We'll have to wait and see. Yeah, a lot of people are talking about the Haruhime things and stuff like that as well. I agree with Red Emperor here. I mean, she was an unwilling prostitute, and just because she turned out to be a virgin, cop out by Mori, I agree, a bit of a cop out there. Doesn't mean that she didn't suffer. I understand where you're coming from. I had the same view for years and still kind of do, but now I'm just glad that the poor girl didn't suffer more than she had to. In order for the plot and premise of the arc to still make sense, let me explain. There was an SS written by Mori where Haruhime mentions how Belle was the first man she'd met since coming to Arario, who was actually interested in talking to her and wasn't just after her body, as all her other customers would give her orders to make her strip, grope her breast, touch her stomach, pet her tail, and of course she would pass out when the men started taking off their clothes, and they would return her every time. Maybe they wouldn't want to face the wrath of the Ishtar Familia after doing something to an unconscious Familia member. I don't know, just my guess. I agree with this. I mean, at the end of the day, you have to remember, right, there's a difference between brothels and some other stuff. This is an argument I actually had with somebody in my Discord. I think it was like 3 or 4 of us. We had a big argument in my Discord in regards to this point, right? Is that how is Haruhime still, you know, pure? You know, there should have been, like, somebody would have taken advantage of her potentially, right, in her fainted state. But you have to remember, one, Aisha is around. If something had happened, no amount of sex is worth you know, dying by the hands of the Ishtar Familia, because the Ishtar Familia still, in their own way, in the way they wanted to control Haruhime's abilities, would have killed somebody if they harmed Haruhime in any way, shape, or form, and so on and so forth. I think, you know, there are reasons behind it, and of course, at the end of the day as well, we have to remember that this is a fantasy world. There are different morals. There are different sort of like, morals is completely different. Morals, there are different morals, there are different sort of rules, regulations, and so on and so forth, right? So something to keep in mind there. Just because the poor girl didn't get penetrated against her will, what a line there, by the way. It just doesn't make her any less of a victim. I agree with that. This is the point I'm trying to make. At the end of the day, she is still someone who suffered a lot, and not only that, again, Belle rescued her and saved her from the grasps of this Familia that were using her and that were trying to take advantage of her. So in my opinion, I think that, you know, we are still in the clear with Volume 7. Could it have been better? Could it have been more mature? Yes. it doesn't mean it's bad. No, I disagree with that. So yeah, having not read volume 18, I cannot judge. In the end, SO narrates the events of the Loki Familia as FM narrates those of the Hestia Familia. I agree. I absolutely agree. What does SM refer to? SM. What does MS? I assume MS he's referring to main series. I can assume that by Darker. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Let's continue on and see. I always knew Lafia was the main character. It was obvious to anyone reading it. Yeah, pretty much. I mean, it was Lafia and Eyes that were like focal characters, and then you'd have obviously Tiona as part of a volume, and they would get their own arc. Bet got his own arc. Finn got his arc to an extent as well. And yeah, I think that's absolutely fine. I'm clarifying this with I haven't read volume 18 and only read the wiki synopsis. That's also something we have to keep in mind. Us as an English audience hasn't read the official volume 18 translation. We're still gonna get that in December, which I will be of course reviewing. But yeah, I'm not surprised that it turned out mid. None of the large-scale adventure battles have been amazing, since the story needs to involve all the main characters. Then it needs to have the people who can actually win the fights but still have the weaker characters do something and beat higher level opponents. It's fun against monsters to unleash stupid skills and new tech, but against other adventurers it always feels like an ass pull and disrespectful to the level system. Yeah, that is true. I mean, I'm not gonna deny that. That is always gonna be a very difficult challenge. I disagree with this, and I think they did Omori did the best job he could. If not, maybe he could have done a bit of a better job, but he did a good job nonetheless. I think for that is the big breaking point, is that nobody believed that without the Loki Familia, you know, the Hestia Familia was going to be the Freya Familia. Now, you know, looking at it, I still believe that it makes sense. You know, we had what was it? I think it was like 3 or 4 level 6s, Bell and one more person going up against Otaro. Like, come on. I think 6 is okay. I know Otaro was nearing level 8 basically, if not at level 8, and I still believe, you know, him getting down to his knee and having to recharge basically for a little bit, because he wasn't knocked down, he wasn't knocked out, he wasn't beaten technically. It was just that he had to recharge effectively, and he was brought to one knee, and then Bell could go further basically. They were distracting him and Bell could go forward. I think that's where it comes into play, that people will be a little bit annoyed with that whole situation. And again, I want to read the volume 18 official translation so I can give you guys my better opinions on that, and I think a lot of you guys want to do the same as well. So let's wait and see, pretty much. Let's wait and see, of course, right? But yeah, I hope Bell actually achieves max level. We don't know what the max level is, but I assume everybody's gonna say that Bell will probably hit level 7, level 8. I think that's everybody's prediction, right? So yeah. Yeah, pretty much. I mean, that's just how it is. As a result, volume 18 had no choice to be rewritten, because the prime reason that could have allowed Loki Familia to be involved to help Bell's Familia was gone. I'm also glad that Eyes will be more featured. Yeah, I agree. I think Bell will be featured more and more. I think, yeah, people want for Bell to get to level 8, but I think it's gonna be a bit difficult. We'll have to wait and see. Yeah, there are 3 pages to the whole interview. So the 2 other pages are more so about how, you know, Omori started the writing and everything, which I would highly recommend reading. It's pretty good, in all honesty. It is pretty good. All right, I'm gonna stop there with these. In all honesty, you guys can have a look and check out for yourselves in regards to this entire interview, in all honesty. But let's go over to my comments, and I want to read the comment from Victor more so than anything else, because everybody's given their thoughts on about it. I want to read Victor's, and I want to read HL Undertaker's here. So let's read Victor's. Cthulhu or Cthulhu, this is what I struggle with, by the way, is pronounced that way. So thank you so much, Victor. Full Metal Panic is a late 90s light novel that later got an anime in the early 2000s. So something that Omori mentioned in the interview was that he used to be a big fan of Full Metal Panic. So this is a light novel that I might read, to be quite honest, and watch an anime for, to be quite honest, because it does seem like it was very popular for its time. And while Victor does say it doesn't hold up to a lot of current light novels or anime, I still want to give it a shot and see how it is, because if it's inspired Omori to an extent, I want to see how it is. Still, if you haven't read it, I'd recommend reading like the light novels at least once or twice, reading like light novels 1 or 2, or at least attempting watching the anime, as it covered, I think, the first 3 light novels with some changes. The interview was so insightful, well-asked questions with a well-structured response, didn't really dance around the questions and gave good responses. And this is the point I want to make. The questions that he answered were so well done, in all honesty. From start to finish, I feel like he did a good job in answering a lot of the questions without hesitating at all, in terms of, you know, like umming or eyeing or maybe not, I don't know. I think that's fantastic from him. I absolutely agree with that. The next thing, Undertaker, and this is the Undertaker's point. I'm really disappointed about this. It's just it sounded like he's just gonna leave Lafia and Eso and never gonna mention her at all in the main series. And this is a point that I didn't necessarily think about, but it's a fair point. It's something I referred to earlier on, where if Lafia does continue to grow but doesn't appear in the main series in the finale arc, that's gonna be a little bit of a problem. I personally don't need her to make an appearance every so often in the main series. I agree with but I agree with people that she needs to still exist in some way, shape, or form. We need to see her at least once. We haven't seen her at all, you know, and I think we need to at least see her once, like name drop her at least once or twice, you know what I mean? Omori, that would be greatly appreciated. But if she even appears in the final fight, I think that'll be a good way to wrap it up, and I will be okay with that. But if she doesn't, that's a problem, and I agree with that. It is such a disservice to anyone, someone who's supposed to be the next part of the next generation of adventurers. It makes me, what is the point of Eso at this point? It might as well be Loki Chronicle at this point. That, and I wanted to refer to that, but that's what Sword Art Rotoria has been. It's been Loki Familiar Chronicles since the very beginning. It's always been about Aiz and Lafia, and while yes, Lafia had a major part to play in the story for Eso, Aiz just as much had a part to play up until SO12 with Revis especially, right? And then of course the rest of the Loki Familia had their roles to play. Bet volumes 7 and 8. Reveria and Gareth and Finn have had their roles to play as the commanders and, you know, executives of the leading executives of the Loki Familia. Tiona had their role to play as well in volumes 5 and 6 as well. And then of course you have, like I said, you know, Lafia and Aiz played their role from start to finish. While I agree Lafia has been a focal point compared to the other Loki Familia members, it doesn't mean that the other Loki Familia members aren't a thing at all in SO. They are very important pieces of the puzzle. So Sword Art Rotoria has been a Loki Chronicle series more so than anything else. But yeah, that's just my thought on it. But yeah, that's what I wanted to read in my comment section. Let me know what you guys think though. I'm very curious to see what you guys have to say. Yet again, a pretty long video, but in all honesty, I wanted to make this video. I wanted to go over the reactions and I wanted to see what you guys have to say in regards to, of course, this interview. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below as well if you guys have any further things to say. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. Please be sure to leave a like down below, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Until then, take it easy everybody. Bye bye.